Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Gulf Coast Poker Podcast. This is going to be our 19th podcast. I'm Gene D and have Wild Bill Phillips, my partner in crime and co-owner of Gulf Coast Poker, here with me. Also with us is poker writer and GCP operative Ben Saxon. Um, Bill, we before we get into our next guest, you want to go ahead and plug the Pearl River event we got coming up?
Sure, that's our next event. It starts March 13th with the GCP Tour Championship. To play that, it's a $500 buy-in. We're going to have prizes added to it, which will constitute essentially a lot of main event seats, including some bigger buy-in main event seats. Last year, we gave away a WPT World Championship seat valued at $10,400. This is going to surpass that in terms of money added to the prize pool, and it's divvied up a little more because I think one of the kind of complaints last year was just the prize pool was kind of structured weird with that big prize at first. The 10K kind of made a difference and made it hard for them to negotiate chops and all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of broken it down into different seats. I think people are going to be really happy with it. And there's going to be shared a little bit. It's not all going to be so top heavy. And then we have the regular Million Philly series. We've changed the schedule a little bit. So instead of doing the standard 6-flight multi-bag thing, we're going to be doing, I believe it's 3 super deep stacked long registration flights for the opening event. And we'll see how that goes. I think it was ready to kind of change things up a little bit. We didn't want things to get stale, and we'll probably revisit the format again later. And finally, at the end of that, we'll have kind of a group poker thing that we're experimenting with on the Monday afterwards called Clash of the Clans. And it's going to be 6 teams of people that are specifically invited. By the way, to see if you're eligible for the GCP Tour Championship, March 13th, go to gulfcoastpoker.net. Scroll down just a little bit and you'll see a link to go to the qualifiers, and there's a page sponsored by Maker's Mark where it lists everybody who's finished in the top 10 of a GCP preliminary event or top 20 of a GCP main event, or the same for any GCP covered event, including the heater and the events we've covered at MGM National Harbor. So that's a lot this week. Thank you for your patience as I plug that.
Good stuff. Any tournaments that are not on the schedule that are normally on?
So we're not having the 2 bigger buy-in events, and there was some careful thought that went into that, and I know a lot of people were disappointed with that. And we're certainly going to try and get them back on the schedule, or at least one, or maybe a hybrid of both. So normally we do a freeze out and we do a high roller. I believe the price point's 1,100 and 1,700 or somewhere in there. So we'll definitely have a bigger than $1,000 buy-in at a future date at Pearl River. There was a lot of people that were unhappy to see both go, but just in terms of the scheduling, it made sense this way. And we've also noticed when we did this event last March and we had the GCP Tour Championship, there was a dip on those bigger buy-in events because a lot of the players came and played this first $500 event, then played the opener, and they fired a lot of bullets. So when midweek came around for those bigger buy-ins, there was a dip in people that were participating. So in anticipation of that and some other factors, that was part of the thought process for why it's not there.
Good stuff. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I guess for this, we're going to do a little bit of a roundtable, and we got a couple of topics to discuss. Ben,
And the first topic is
you're gonna keep talking, Bill.
Go ahead, Ben. You can roll it.
No, I just want to congratulate Bill for shipping. I don't know the name of the tournament, but I know it was a couple 100-person field. Was it a $500 buy-in? Is that right?
Yes.
It was.
Charles? Okay. Yeah, so we wanted to congratulate you on that, and talk to us about that run. I know you're not playing a lot of tournaments, so it's all the more impressive and maybe satisfying that you're able to outright ship one. So talk us through that experience this past weekend.
So it's called the Lagniappe series, I think, which is a great name, and it's done by our friends at Southern Poker, who we partner with up in Bossier, and we kind of do some other things with. So this is one of their first events, I guess, going out on their own and doing it. And me and Gene were able to get there and play, and we both had a good feeling that weekend that, you know, one of us was going to make a good run. It's weird. Sometimes it's just in the air. Sometimes you just kind of know that things are going to line up for you. And I played with a lot of good players, especially deep in that tournament. And like any other poker player, I just kind of ran good in the right spots. And I wish I could say it was all skill, but I ran pretty good. So, I mean, that's what you got to do to win a tournament. But we got down about 5-handed, and we did a one of the players suggested doing a save for a good chunk of the money. I kind of balked at it at first, and then I said, well, maybe if we can figure out a way, I don't know, for some reason in my head I wanted to leave with a certain amount, so I tried to figure out a way to make that possible if I ended up winning it. And they did the math, and it ended up being a little bit less than that. And then when we got down to 3-handed, I had won a major pot with aces, and I had almost half the chips in play, and one of the players was kind of short, and the discussion came up again with the money that we had saved about divvying it up and just kind of ending the tournament then. And I didn't say it, but I was supposed to pick up my wife from the airport. My wife and daughter went to a volleyball tournament in San Antonio at 11, and I thought if we could wrap up the deal when we did, I could get in my car and make it from Lake Charles to New Orleans to possibly pick them up. And so I wanted to do that. We played the last flight, and it was the longest running. And so the night before, I think I was up till like 2 playing, and then I don't think I really got much sleep. So I was pretty tired as well. So I had a lot of factors that made me want to kind of make agreements, even though I came in with maybe a bigger number in mind. And it's very weird, very strange. I visualized myself leaving with their green plaque when I saw it on the internet when they had other winners, and I had a figure in my head that I wanted to win, and I just felt confident the whole series. I mean, the whole tournament. There's a couple times I got short, and I never got worried. I said I'm going to win this, and the cards are going to come, or I'm going to find a way. And I guess I got really lucky, and I did. So it was kind of a coincidental to have those feelings and it actually play out that way. But I am glad that it played out, because as somebody told me, it's just a reminder, these people, our friend Chase Haydell at Harris, who now works at the Horseshoe in Las Vegas, used to joke with me when we started doing these tournaments. He goes, yeah, Bill, if you can't win it, you got to run it. And, so Chase, I hope he's listening to this podcast. So occasionally me and Gene can get out there and make a deep run and get lucky and win it still. So we still got some credibility in the streets, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So Bill, let me ask you this real quick. Were you able to make it back to New Orleans to pick up your wife and daughter?
So with payouts, and you know how that goes, and all the stuff you got to do with taxes and everything like that, I looked at the clock and I was going to be 30 minutes late, and I knew their flight was on time, so I didn't really want them waiting at the airport at 12:30 for 30 minutes. And I didn't want the temptation to just lead foot it all the way there. So I opted to spend the night that night. So, unfortunately, no, I didn't get to pick them up.
Well, responsibility prevails, as usual. And I hope they were happy for you. I'm sure they were. Definitely never want to give excuses, but that's a pretty damn good excuse to have to spend one more night up in
right. Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, I think they're cool with it. They generally when I get to play, we're away so much doing the other stuff with the tournaments these days that I don't get to play much. So when I do get to play, my wife's happy for me, but much happier if I win. So Gene did pretty good. We saw a lot of familiar faces, a lot of good players. Everybody that didn't go up to the Run Good event in Tunica, I think, was there. Most of the people from Lafayette and Baton Rouge went west. Want to compliment Sean Calvert, who I chopped with. He played really well throughout. Woody Moore, friends with the Southern Poker guys. He's from Texas. He's a beast. He used to be the all-time leading casher on circuit events, and he got me pretty good. I want to give credit to him. I played a hand late where I guess we're at the final table, and there might have been 5 or 6 left, and he'd been short stacked. I think I had king, queen in late position, and I decided based on his stack size, if he shoved, I was going to go with it. And it gets to him. Well, he hems and haws, and he can't decide what he's going to do. And then he kind of makes this exaggerated call. And in my head, I'm like, okay, well, if I hit any piece of this flop, I got to go with it. So flop comes comes ace, queen, X, and he checks. Now, I really think he has a lot of aces he's defending there. So maybe I should have rethought it. But I went with my plan and I shipped it, and he snap called, and he had pocket aces and played me like a fiddle. I definitely didn't put him on that hand. I put him on maybe an ace, but I got to give him a compliment for that. That was kind of an old school move, and he reeled me in like the fish that I am.
Call.
That's exactly right. Who else? Amber. I want to shout out Amber Douglas, who does our embroidery for our hats and our hoodies. She was the last woman sitting. She made the final table. She played great. She got a cooler to bust. And I played pretty much the whole tournament on her left. Every time we'd break a table, she'd be on my right. I'd be directly on her left. And I got lucky because I ran very good in those spots against her, but she was able to get chips from everybody else. So, but she did really good. And pretty much everybody that made the final table and the final 2 tables were really good players. The guy that chopped with me and Sean said that he thought that table was much tougher than the table that he won his ring with in Durant, a few years before. And I think he was right. Like there was no chips being given away. Like it was a battle throughout. So, but that's it. You got everything out of me about that tournament. Let's talk about some of the other people that have won poker tournaments. We saw Jamie Vertuzio, yet another win for the best female player in the South, or at least top 3.
Yeah,
got Chris Reed up there. Preston McEwen won again. I believe his name's Michael Esquivel, who won the main event in that Run Good event, and he comes down to the Million Philly. We've definitely seen him there multiple times, and I've heard he's a good guy too. So it's great to see all these people kind of having success.
Yeah, Jared Ingles got his second WSOP ring up in Cherokee in a PLO event. So I wanted to shout that out as well. So yeah,
that was the top table too, right? Ben, weren't there some other kind of notables in the final table there?
At that final table?
Yeah.
At that final table? Yeah. So Kevin Eister finished 9th.
Yikes.
Yeah. And the GOAT himself, Alan Kessler, finished 12th.
I think Johnny Masters finished 4th. And our GCP operative, Steve Bierman, was up there and shot me a picture of Jared and Johnny. And I'm forgetting, there was one other player when it was down to 4. So I guess whoever came in 3rd or 2nd, but we know. So now y'all go ahead. I had a question, but it's eluding me for a second.
Well, wasn't another person on that final table that has now gotten back into the limelight of owing people money?
Oh, I think that was the main event final table.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I know what you're talking about. But I do want to talk about something that we didn't pre-discuss, but I think it's relevant Ben Mentz. Did you hear Ben Mentz's latest kind of controversy? I don't know if you guys have been following that at all.
Just that there was a controversy. I don't know the details.
All right, so he went down to Moneymaker's poker tour event in Florida, and I guess maybe he was kind of a celebrity guest or whatever. I'm not sure how it worked, but he played the main event, and then he bagged chip lead, and then he had to play the final table on a Monday. Well, for his day job, where he worked for Barstool Sports, he was supposed to do some sort of piece up in Chicago that had, I guess he was leading it, or he was kind of the central figure. So he called into work and said he couldn't go. And then, of course, Barstool didn't really appreciate that very much, and that became a little part of their drama. And I think that President Dave Portnoy was giving Mincy a lot of grief. So, in fact, if I recall correctly, Ben agreed to give a piece of what he won to Dave's new charity. And then I think Moneymaker and the Palm Beach Kennel Club are also going to give money to the charity and maybe throw in an event for it. So maybe trying to turn it into something good. But I always root for Mincy, but he always seems to find himself in these spots, where he's courting controversy by accident.
Right, exactly. A victim of circumstance, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Any other tidbits that we want to discuss?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think I'm good. So I guess without further ado, let me introduce our guest for this episode. So I had the chance to sit down with Eric Vogel, who is Eric's a Nola native and a musician who's toured with the Wooten Brothers, Nigel Hall, Big Sam's Funky Nation, Fred Wesley, Tribal Gold, and the New Orleans Suspects, just to name a few, as well as with his own band, Eric's Gonna Die. He's also a poker pro who can mostly be found in the cash games at Harrah's New Orleans. And yeah, I've been wanting to talk to Eric for a while. He's a really interesting guy, and he offers a rare portrait of somebody who's juggling two very romanticized careers, a musician and a poker pro in New Orleans. And so we talked about how he balances the gigging with the grinding. And yes, anybody who's interested in the Nola music scene, the way that scene has changed over the last 10, 15 years. Eric's been doing both music and poker for a long time in New Orleans. And also the way that poker in New Orleans has changed. I think y'all will we'll appreciate this episode. So without further ado, here's our interview with Eric Vogel. Eric Vogel, welcome to the GCP podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So just to set the scene, we are sitting in Louis Armstrong Park. We were planning to meet in the courtyard for your apartment in the French Quarter. Things are a little loud down there.
Yeah.
So it's a little quieter out here. So I feel like we have a lot we can talk about.
Absolutely.
With poker, with music. And so what I was wondering, first of all, is do you think of yourself primarily as a musician or as a poker player?
It's a great question. Honestly, I've thought about this a lot. Both. Both. I spend my time doing both of them a lot, and I love them both. And it's hard to say, honestly, which I even love more. I really love them both a lot, equally, almost. Yeah.
So I'd love to sort of start from the beginning in both respects. So
why don't you let me know where we should start? You want to start with music or poker?
Yeah, probably music.
Okay.
Start with the music.
Yeah. So how'd you get into music? And I know you played the bass, and
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about just sort of your upbringing, and then also like maybe I don't know if there's a point where you started thinking, hey, maybe I can do this semi-professionally, professionally.
Sure, yeah. I'm from New Orleans originally, and it's always around music and stuff. My dad played piano, and my uncles and everybody played piano, so we had a piano. I started on piano, and loved playing classical and ragtime stuff like Scott Joplin and that sort of stuff. And then we moved to Nashville.
How old were you?
I moved to Nashville. I was probably like 7,
Okay.
8, and then got into a little more. That's when you're getting into guitar stuff. Maybe not quite Nirvana. I can't remember when Nirvana came out, but
They were like the early 90s?
early 90s, yeah, mid 90s. About that time, really getting into guitar, start playing guitar and rocking out and everything. And then by the time I wanted to start a band, nobody wants to play bass. Bass is like less cool, kind of. And so started some bands, and nobody, like I said, nobody wanted to play bass. So I took up the bass, and then getting into high school was playing bass, and I also thought bass sucked, and I thought it wasn't cool.
So you did it just to sort of help out your friends, or?
Yeah, my friends and myself, and starting a band.
Okay.
And also they were kind of, in some weird way, incompetent at bass also. But, I was the least of the incompetents, but still incompetent. And also disgruntled, not liking it. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, well, have you ever heard of, like Bailiff Fleck and the Flecktones? And I had no clue what that was. I wasn't even really like familiar with like Red Hot Chili Peppers or Flea or anybody that was like a cool bass player. And but nonetheless, I was turned on to Bailiff Fleck and the Flecktones and Victor Wooten, and that was the first time I ever heard somebody slap bass, or thumping as they call it, and that opened my eyes to everything related to that, funk music, and then from there, jazz and everything else. But these alternate ways of approaching the bass guitar as an instrument, as opposed to what I thought it was originally, which was just playing the bass notes, which is what you do when you're younger and rock. I play a lot of punk music, so it's fast bass notes, but thumping the bass and tapping and all these other things were concepts that I didn't even know that was a way that one could approach the instrument.
And you learned that through kind of exposure to different musicians that you liked listening to?
Correct. Largely Victor Wooten at that time.
And you mentioned that you know the Wooten Brothers.
I do,
You're
yeah.
close to that family.
Yeah, very, very close. I was very fortunate to have met them in Nashville. They're a family of 5 brothers. One of them has unfortunately passed, Rudy Wooten, who played saxophone, of which they have their club in Nashville called Rudy's Jazz Hall or Jazz Club. But yeah, Reggie Wooten, the oldest brother, taught them all how to play their instruments. Victor, of course, being very famous on bass. Joseph Wooten on keys. He plays with the Steve Miller Band. And yeah, so I was fortunate to become and befriend Reggie Wooten and take lessons from him, and then became close with Victor as one of these younger proteges, if you will.
And are you like a teenager at this point, or?
Yes, teenager. Okay. Yeah, this is all in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then did a lot of country work at that time, and then when I so I was actually touring at the end of high school, and
touring in Nashville or touring like around the country?
Yeah, around the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like, being so young? And
it was great. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. It was everything you wanted from music, in my opinion. Traveling, and it was really great, and just a lot of fun. And largely because of that, I kept doing it into college. I did a lot of tours, and I got more gigs.
So how did you graduated from Tulane?
I did.
So how did you make how did you settle on Tulane, and why'd you decide to come back down to Nola?
Like I said, we had moved to Nashville, and I was always coming back to New Orleans to hang with my cousins and stuff while I lived in Nashville, and very close to my family in New Orleans. And everybody, would go from Nashville, would go to a lot of schools in Nashville, and I just had a real itch to get back to New Orleans. And like I said, I was playing a lot of music, and I was older. You're in college age, 18 to 22, 18 at this point technically, and just wanted to get back, have fun in New Orleans. And I had done the Nashville music scene and wanted to do a lot of the New Orleans music stuff, and decided to come back and pursue finance, which was another, like I said, another passion.
Sure. So like, it's very easy to forget how lucky we are to have so much access to great music here. Like, where are your favorite places to play? I mean, when you were an undergrad at Tulane, where were you gigging at, and like where were your favorite spots?
Yeah, Tipitina's was one of the first.
Legendary.
It was a fantastic place to play, and one of the first places I played. I had played a bunch of little coffee houses, Neutral Ground Coffee House, and a lot of smaller places that wouldn't even really be called clubs, but kind of like open mic stuff, but not even like a Frenchman Street vibe, like a coffee house.
Mm-hmm.
But Tipitina's was always great, and then as I branched out from there, I was on Frenchman a lot, and then Blue Nile was my home base for many years, and still know everybody there, and they're really good friends, and DBA and all those clubs,
Mm-hmm.
It was, but yeah.
Okay, so you sort of hit the ground running musically when you got back to Tulane. You also knew the city from growing up. You're also a finance major, so at some point, I don't know if is there a push and pull of like, well, do I need to choose music? Do I need to choose finance? Is there a way to kind of juggle between them? Like, where was your head at as you were nearing graduation, and what did you settle on?
Yeah, well, that's really kind of where a lot of the poker and stuff comes in. I was playing so much music, and was really into finance, and finance in college is prepping you kind of for a career in investment banking, which is cool and what I wanted, but it's really a lot of like financial statement analysis, and the stuff I'm into now, now it's kind of over COVID, a lot of people started trading, but it is trading. But to answer your question, when I was touring when I graduated college with some people from James Brown's band, and but in college was kind of when that whole poker boom happened, and I had roommates.
So we're in like the early to mid 2000s.
Correct.
At this point? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, we're around the same age. Because I graduated in 2004, and I found poker. Around that time.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And but kind of in the very beginning of that, I wasn't interested in poker, and I had my roommates, and this one roommate was just hardcore. He would be like, "You want to play poker?" I'd be like, "No, let's go out." He's like, "No." And even if we're just sitting there watching movies, he would just deal just like dead hands to everybody, that people weren't even paying attention. He would just deal out hands, and he just loved it. And then I finally gave it a shot, if you will, and was instantly addicted to poker. And I spent years just paying no mind to it, and then I took the first hand and was a full-blown addict.
Do you have a background, did you grow up playing games? Did you grow up playing card games and stuff?
My family, my extended family, they played a lot of, like on holidays and stuff, on like 4th of July and stuff like that. They'd have a lot of parties, and they would like nickel and dime gambling and stuff on poker and stuff. And my grandfather, my extended family is like Hispanic, and so my grandfather and I would always play a bunch of we played dominoes, and we play all these other card games that were kind of like lesser known card games, but not explicitly gambling games, except for like gin or whatever. But you could always bet on anything. But I played a lot of cards and dominoes with my family when I was young, and then they would play for money and stuff, and I was still young, but not allowed to play for money because they were drinking and stuff. Sure. But so through that, I've always had a love for those games, but for whatever reason, just didn't get into poker in the beginning.
So what do you think it was or is about poker that's so addictive, or that hooks you, or that enthralls you?
It's for me, it's about putting yourself in. Obviously, everybody wants to make money, right? So it's obviously the lure is to make money, but I enjoy the trying to figure it out. Obviously, I wish people just gave me money for free, right? But the concept of trying to figure out the answer to this situation, and if you're right, get paid for it. If you're wrong, it sucks to lose. It really sucks. I think everybody hates that, but hopefully you can learn something from it and move forward. But it's the same thing with trading, and even the same thing with music. The music's gonna suck, the hand's not gonna work, none of it works unless you're kind of like in the groove, in my opinion. And
So in those early years of getting exposed to poker, playing poker with your roommates. How did you learn? How did you improve? Did you stick to just like playing recreationally? I know Harrah's was humming along at that point too. Did you go out and play at Harrah's, or?
Yeah, so during that early time, I started playing on Poker Stars, probably much like everybody else.
The glory days of online poker.
The glory days of online poker. Poker Stars, Party Poker, $10 MTTs, $20 MTTs, the $3 rebuys, the $5 rebuys, the sit and goes, the turbos, the cash, all the standards, basically 100%.
You played everything.
Played it all.
Yeah.
Played it all. And multi-tabled, was a big multi-tabler, loved it, and was doing well, as well as one, was profitable, whatever that may mean. And then, then I tried to go to Harrah's, quote unquote tried. And I remember I bought in for like a few $100 and I lost it instantly. And I remember thinking how basically the short of, I still wasn't a good player, but I justified it as in like, oh, I'm an online guy. This is too slow. I need more tables. And, a bunch of, kind of foolishness. And, but I just remember and then so I stopped going to Harrah's until probably, a few years later. And then ultimately, later moving into the French Quarter and then going every single day.
Okay. So we'll get there, but I'm interested in what life looked like after graduation. Obviously it's a pivotal moment for anybody who goes to school. I can relate to a lot of your education journey. Went to high school. There's just never a question. Like, I was just going to go to college. My parents are both school teachers. It's just like, this is what you do. And then there's this sort of open-endedness. And in my case, I did. I'm going to keep going to school for a while longer. But what did you settle on upon graduation?
Yeah. So upon immediate graduation, I. Right prior to that, I was touring with some people from James Brown's band, and I had my own band, and I was, kind of at the height of my own band, and I was like, I'm going to do this as long as I can, or as long, I can't stop now. The timing was just such that I graduated college at the time that, my band was kind of in full throttle, and.
Oh, we got some trash talk right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Sad thing about this place, it's beautiful, and there's just there's a lot of people who have a lot of mental health issues.
100%.
Who are unhoused.
100%. You know what's sick? And I don't want to say, because what's sick is we don't have a subway system. I go to New York. These are the places where you find these sort of people, right? And meaning parks, subway places where who knows what that guy was doing, you know what I mean? But I tend to see these sort of outbursts like this, that sort of person, and then security guard thing, and parks,
sure,
and specifically
because there's
subways.
nowhere else for the unhoused people to go and spend their time. It's going to be
exactly
public spaces. It's going to be libraries and parks.
That's exactly right. Oh, and that's a great one, or I shouldn't say great one, but a great point. Like the New Orleans Public Library, just right on the other side of Canal there. There's a lot of where all the buses meet and everything. Sure. But sorry about that. But.
We lost the thread.
You
were talking about touring with James Brown band.
And so when I was doing that, I was just I really kind of was foregoing a career in finance at this point. At least I was putting it on pause in my mind.
And there would have been an option, I guess. The option would have been just maybe stay in Nola, you think?
Oh, I was going to go to New York.
Yeah, that's where you go,
It was the New York thing.
Okay.
And actually, I was in San Francisco playing a show, and my mom was like, oh, there's this she had some friend, and she was like, oh, you should meet him. He's an old floor trader. And so he came out to the show, and I met him, and that was through him is where I got introduced to this basically concept of trading. And by trading, I mean shorter term trading and day trading. Because anybody that places a trade is a trader, So with respect to this time frame, just being day trading or intraday day trading, and then futures at that. So that was so I was doing music, met that guy. He became a mentor, and then the sort of the poker and all the things I love from finance, and kind of presented itself in this new game of trading.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of continued to do music, and now picked up trading, and then was playing poker, and all wrapped into one at that point.
Mm-hmm. And so at this point, you're probably, I guess this would be what, like 2005, 6, 7, something like this?
Yeah, that's exactly
Where
right.
did, I think it's just important to pause and ask, like, how Katrina figured into this? Like, were you in school at the time, or had you graduated?
That would have been my senior year.
Okay, so yeah, how did that obviously derailed everything?
Derailed it all. And my family's here, and so they lost a lot of stuff. Everybody but my mother and father were still in New Orleans, and all over uptown, French Quarter, so obviously the university closed and the city was shut down. So I went back to Nashville. A lot of people at that time all the universities were accepting Tulane students. I had friends who went to Harvard and all the Ivy League stuff, and people went out west, and everybody was just kind of having a great time, if you will. But I went back to Nashville, went to Vanderbilt. And it was kind of a sort of a life I never had, because everybody was going to Vanderbilt and some of these Nashville schools. And did that for the semester, and then came back to New Orleans as soon as I could.
And there was no question for you. You're like,
yeah, because my life was
back.
hard in New Orleans at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It felt weird being in Nashville. Of course I had friends because I went to high school in Nashville, and a lot of people, you go to high school in Nashville, stay in Nashville, but my music life and everything, and all my friends and all my possessions and everything were in New Orleans. And and actually, and then on the side note, my aunt had a house uptown in the Garden District, and it burned down during Katrina, but I stored all my stuff at her house. So like, I lost a lot of my stuff because I was living at the dorms or off campus, and so I just kind of like, I didn't have anything. I just kind of wanted to go back home to I didn't have anything, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
So you were back in like, I guess, 06?
Yeah.
Yeah.
06, 07, and then was still doing my band, but lesser so, and was picking up other gigs with local musicians, musicians from New Orleans that were either playing in New Orleans or touring nationally. And so then I got like more and more into the New Orleans music scene at that point. And my music got me a firm footing for, say, the next 10 years or whatever.
Okay.
Of music and my rise, or whatever, through the Nashville or the New Orleans music scene.
So one question I had for you, and I wonder about this both generally and like personally. I wonder about your thoughts on which is harder, making a career as a musician or as a poker player. I know that you have your own, specificity and eccentricities, as we all do. What are your thoughts about that, both personally and just in general? Because they both seem very weird and challenging and quirky ways to make a living.
Absolutely. I think they're very difficult ways to make a living. I think it's always easier, quote unquote, to get a job that has a guaranteed paycheck, whether that's like working at a grocery store or being a doctor, just gigs where there's guaranteed money. And there's never any guaranteed money in poker. There's guaranteed money when you get a gig, and then once you do it, but there's no guarantee that there's gonna be another gig. In an instance like me, who's a freelance musician, meaning I play with a bunch of different bands when they have work, but I am not a member of any particular band per se. But I do consistently work with different bands. It's hard. It's I think people that do it, obviously everybody wants to play music, or I'm saying those that play music in theory, I think would want to be able to do it and make money and be able to live off it. I think at some point, you have to accept reality, and you can either do it or you can't. But it's certainly, a job of love or whatever. It's like who you are. It's hard to envision myself doing anything else, as difficult as this path may be. So it makes you realize you're fortunate if you can do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're both activities that I think are like closely bound up with people's identities. You know what I mean? And I can definitely relate to that as like like as a teacher, or it's like it feels like if you abandon it or change, it's sort of like you're changing yourself as a person.
Very much so.
So was there a turning point for you, like poker wise? Let's just sort of follow poker a little bit. In like 06, 07, you get back to Nola. Did you take another crack at Harrah's, and at some point something turned for you where you were able to make the live poker work?
Yeah, I don't really remember much. I remember though losing my 300 buy-in at cash. I remember trying at one point, because I was playing all the MTTs online, the little $10 ones and $20, $30, $50 one, the $100. Never even played the 500 Sundays or anything. But I remember then I was like, well, I'll try one of these 300 when the WSOP came to Harrah's New Orleans.
One of the circuit events.
The circuit events, yeah. And I remember still not understanding necessarily how it's okay to go all in or whatever the case. And I was still afraid to lose all my chips or lose my 300 buy-in. So whatever, lost. I remember playing the tournament and I went deep, but I remember I lost or whatever, lost my stack, and because still wasn't at any sort of reasonable level. And really the turning point was meeting some of the New Orleans poker players and trying to befriend them, kind of like what you do in the music scene, but it seems like people do it less maybe in poker, but in music everybody's trying to network and get the next gig and all this other stuff. Obviously in poker, you're like playing against other people, and in music too, like everybody's trying to steal everybody else's gig or whatever, but at least everybody's trying to, like, I don't know, on the surface be friendly, and it's like, it feels like a community. Everybody says poker community, but I don't know. I don't hang out with too many people from the poker room, but I was fortunate to meet some very, very good friends.
And who were some of the, we just had a conversation with Matt Higgins about this. I don't know if you know Matt. He's a really accomplished tournament player on the Gulf Coast, and he was talking about support systems. So, I mean, what did that look like for you coming up? I mean, were there specific people whose brains you were trying to pick and who you connected with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once I started to get privy to, wanting to try the live scene more, we started to see some of the guys that were always playing the bigger games, and then just started to ask questions: who's this, who's that, and then just like classic, hit the computer, hit the internet, Google the names, learn more about the people if you don't know what they've done, and I came to a good story is I remember Ryan Lanahan. If you know Ryan Lanahan, is a very good friend of mine. I remember, always seeing him there and everything, and trying to befriend him. And to his credit, he wasn't trying to really have more friends, but I was like, hey, you want to hang out? And he's like, oh yeah, man. But, nothing really materialized, and that's okay. And, but then one day we ran into each other at a mutual friend's house, and we were able to talk outside the poker room, which is always hard to meet up people outside the poker room. In my experience, so much talk, you just talk at the table, and I'll see you later, man.
It reminds me of like church or like, I don't know, like cooking class, or like something where you're just sort of bonding with around this shared activity, and then if you're not in that context, sometimes there's not as much to talk about.
Yeah, it feels like school.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that hang out, and I know there's a lot of cats that exchange numbers and hang out outside of the room. That's just not my personal experience, but it is with Ryan. And I've been very fortunate, and he's done very well in poker and all different his tournaments, except cash, obviously, and so he's just become one of my best friends, and for many years now. But to be able to run hands by him, Kaufman Tally, just a couple of the guys, and then moving out from their circles, those guys are much more successful than me, and then they have friends, and I've been fortunate to hang with some of those guys and become friends with those people, and just continuing to try and get better, and just continuing to try and network that. But through that and meeting some of the people in Harrah's New Orleans, then I've met some people in Los Angeles and the greater Gulf South region as well, and even things like this podcast, man, just becoming familiar with the names.
No, I think that's definitely something that that we're trying to participate in is building community and connecting folks, and so it's always great to hear people's stories, and it's a reminder of how much we, for all the sort of zero-sum dynamics that happen in our poker table, like we really do all have a lot in common.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's great to hear
that sort of stuff. Just being able to come play cash games as while you're a touring musician. When you're at home, if you're not touring, while you're at home, sometimes you don't get too many calls because people think you're busy or think you're out of town or think that the gig that they're going to offer you is potentially beneath you. So it's almost like when you're on the road, your name is taking out of the hat, kind of. So you have to kind of do a little bit of legwork, tell everybody I'm back in town, but it's also a good time to be able to play all that poker.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the other side of the coin that I wanted to ask you about. There's this sort of information sharing, having a support system, playing a lot, potentially studying a lot, but then there's also just sort of like the structuring your week. And I think that's like a major pitfall for poker players, is like a lot of us are drawn to poker because of the freedom and because you can, especially with cash games. So you come when you want, you leave when you want, but that is sort of at odds with, like, you need to have your butt in the seat and you need to grind out hours. So I would love to hear how you have juggled the schedule of, it's not only music and poker, it's also like, you still day trade a bit?
I do, yeah.
So yeah, like what is your week, what does like your normal week look like? And I don't know if this answer is different back in 2010 versus now, but like how has that changed, and how do you think about striking the right balance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been pretty fortunate to have, my schedule has been really the same for the past 10 years approximately. And after college and doing a lot of touring and stuff, and then becoming an older, at that point you'd done more time as a musician. You have to do time in the towns before, nobody just gives the new guy the gig per se, unless you're the best dude around, then that guy always gets the gig. But you kind of got to do some time. And so at that point for the past 10 years or whatever, I'd done my time and had a lot of consistent work. And but to answer your question, my day, which is really every day is wake up and trade.
At what time?
The market opens at 8:30 a.m. Central, and so I'll wake up. I don't sleep really well, so I just wake up whenever, really, but no later than 7:30. Okay, and no earlier than like 6 or 5:30. But if I wake up at 6, I'm like trying to find something to do. But then I'll trade 8:30 to 10:30 Central is kind of like the morning session, as they say, and then like 11 to 1 is kind of lunchtime, as they say, and 1 to 3 is the afternoon session. If I end up staying all the way till 3, then I'll grab a little snack or something and then go around 3:30, try to be to Harrah's around 4, and play poker for a few hours. I try to be out of there no later than 8 because I want to eat dinner, and I try and have like an end to the day somehow. I want to be there as late as possible. The games always just get better and better and better. But that's kind of where I'm different than the other, professional poker players or full-time players is, if you're like pure poker, then I think you need to be there for the best games at the best times. And that's, the evening hours into the early morning hours. And if I do that, it's just hard to wake up and trade. Also, it's hard for me to do that if I have a gig. So, wake up and trade, and then go to Harrah's in the afternoon, and then if there's a gig, do the gig that evening. And this is part of the stuff that makes it hard, man. It's a lot of work or whatever, quote unquote. It's just a lot of time awake and just hustling, man. It's a grind, right? Even music. Anytime you don't have a guaranteed paycheck, it's a grind, in my opinion. Until you're at a level. But even when you're at a level, it's still like a grind. Nobody's just giving me money.
And maybe we could talk a little bit about that, because the landscape in New Orleans has really shifted from the early days on Frenchman and where we are now. So a lot of it's kind of the case with poker as well, but the music the gigging industry, it's seasonal to some degree, right? And like there's going to be
Very
high
much so.
periods and low periods. So like what are your
Absolutely.
busy times, and then when are you able to kind of take breaks?
Yeah, the busy times are really, summers. That's when all the festivals start popping off, really, and the festival time is just a great time. And so your April, May, June, July, and then even your fall festivals. But the summertime is usually the busiest, and then that obviously also coincides with for me, a lot of traveling. And if I'm out west, a lot of times I'm able to sneak on by to Vegas for the summer series. But music schedule depending, music takes the precedence largely on all my scheduling. And but yeah.
Where have you toured that jumps out? Like where are sort of your most like memorable places you've toured? You toured not just in the U.S. but around the world, I'm guessing.
Yeah, everywhere in the world largely, except for Asia. Haven't done too much Asian stuff, but I love Europe. I think probably a lot of people love Europe. In the United States, I'm a city guy. I love New York. I love Los Angeles. If I'm gonna get into more like the nature stuff, I love your Montanas and Wyoming. Jackson Hole's great. Big Sky, Montana, and all that stuff. I like Florida. I like Havana. I like the world, man. I like it all. I like Europe. I like Spain, Barcelona quite a bit. Italy a lot. Croatia's a really cool one. I think a lot of people look over.
Do you have time to like sightsee, or are you just sort of going from one place to the next?
On
these trips.
On a lot of these trips, even on domestic tours, if like the first show is in San Francisco of a tour, I'll go up a few days early, hang in San Francisco with a friend, and then if the last show of that tour is in Portland, maybe I'll stay a couple days in Portland.
Yeah, that's one thing that always jumps out to me when I scan the tour dates of some artist I'm interested in. It's just like how rapid fire, and you look at it and you're just like, man, like you barely have any days off, and every day you're in a different city.
Oh yeah.
And that just feels like it would be like a grind, as you say, and hard to adjust to.
Yeah, no, it's a grind, and much like all grinds though, like it pays off, like when you hit a sick hand or when you have a great gig, it makes the grind worth it, because as much as it is a grind, like you still do love it, right? You still love
you have to.
Yeah,
if there's not love, then what are you doing it for?
That's it, man. And but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I certainly am very fortunate.
So I wanted to ask you a question about the state of the music industry in New Orleans, and I thought, well, there's actually something that I want to just read to you and get your take on, because that really gets to the way that Frenchman Street in particular, and like the Nola music scene in general have evolved.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read you this quote. It was from an op-ed in Offbeat, and it's from this jazz musician who wanted to remain anonymous, who's been gigging for like 30 years. So it's like somebody who's like a native who really knows the scene, who is sort of lamenting where we are, where the musicians are, New Orleans musicians are. So I'll just read this to you, and I'd love to hear your response if you think that this is, I mean, it's a rant.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear if you think this is just sort of like sour grapes, if like to what extent this is accurate. So he writes, Frenchman Street has devolved into a crude imitation of what Bourbon Street was in its worst years. I've seen Bourbon in that state. My first steady gig was in 1972. The music offered on Frenchman today is mostly poorly played commercial crap, more closely related to Disney World than to New Orleans, with repertoire sickeningly inbred by the bands participating. They copy each other's songs, and even copy each other's patter between tunes. In all my years playing in this city, never has the musical quality become so low. It's extremely disheartening. Many of the players, some actually proficient on their instruments, have absolutely no knowledge of New Orleans traditions and no knowledge of musicians, of their instruments of the past, having come from elsewhere. And then he goes on to say, pay is still in the toilet and just as bad or worse as it was in 2017. But musicians themselves have a large part to play in the conditions they endure. We consistently present excellence, conditions, and pay will advance. But we need venues that are interested in presenting musical excellence, not just Disneyland commercial crap played by Yankee carpetbaggers masquerading as New Orleans artists. Also, we need listeners who can tell the difference. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, great point, Guy. You know, good. Those are great points.
Accurate in your
Well,
opinion?
you know, yeah, fair assessments. The problem becomes, you know, it's reliant. You know, the clubs and everybody are just relying on what the tourists want, right? And this guy's saying, you know, the tourists should want more, you know, local funk or local sounds and less Bruno Mars. And that's the bourbonization he's talking about on Frenchman. You know, at one point, you know, Frenchman was the local street and Bourbon was the tourist street. And so if you wanted to go hear top 40 stuff, you went to Bourbon. But you used to be able to go down to any club on Frenchman and, you know, not hear the top 40. You know, you would hear all the local stuff. And so this guy's unhappy that, yeah, you don't hear that as much as you used to. You hear a lot of the same stuff as on Bourbon. And so why? Well, because once all the tourists found out about, you know, Frenchmen, then the clubs cater to that. And if at that point some guy's like, play the Bruno Mars song, you know, then the people will play, you know, the bands will play it. The problem also becomes the clubs start paying the musicians a percentage of the bar tab, and their pay becomes literally a percentage of the bar tab. So the more patrons that the band's music attracts, in theory, the more those people will drink and the more that money that band will make. And so, you know, when they play, you know, Bon Jovi, you know, more people come in than when they play, you know, some New Orleans piano song like Tipatina or something. Now, yeah, the person will come in and stick their head in, but the tourists want to come and hang and take shots to Bon Jovi and like scream and stuff. And that's cool, man. That's a vibe. But is that the bar's fault? Is that the club's fault? Or is that like everybody's just catering to the tourist? Yeah, so maybe everybody in America should just say, we want New Orleans music. And then that would stop. But, you know, it's like a self-fulfilling thing, you know?
Sure. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. So, like, what?
But also the problem is, like I said, the clubs don't. They tie the music, they tie the musicians' pay in with the success of the bar. And that's, you know, it's not. It's, you have bar and you have music. And if the bar is just outright paid bands, you know, a sum, just like clubs do, well then the bar would be playing for a product that band sells, which would be local New Orleans music or funk. But the bar doesn't want to pay $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 for some local band. They'd rather just have some band of young kids from New York or whatever this guy's saying, carpetbaggers, play Bon Jovi and not think about it. They don't, you know, really care about the musicians. They just want to make the money. So a lot of it's on the clubs, you know?
And so, like, obviously there's a lot of debate about what's to be done. Can anything be done? Like, how do you, like, what would you say to locals or anybody who wants to support local musicians? Like, what can we do to support local musicians that we aren't doing?
Yeah, you know, even when you do go to those clubs on Frenchman where the bands are playing, you know, top 40, they still are local. So, you know, a great thing that you can always tip, you know, and in this day and age, you know, everybody's got Venmo and everything. So that's always great, you know, because like we've said, it's hard to make money playing gigs. And even then, a lot of times, like, there's just, you know, cities are saturated with, you know, a lot of musicians trying to make it. And, you know, to be at a level where you can consistently make money is, again, hard. And you just got to go out and support the local acts, you know, go to your Maple Leafs, go to your Tipitinas, again, even go to your Frenchman Streets, but, you know, try and support the acts of the stuff you like. And, you know, check out the music scene that New Orleans has that you can't get anywhere else, which is still like the best funk around, you know. We really are the best funk, and just the best live scene where if you just walk in off the street, we really are kind of the best musicians off the street, you know, and quality wise. And yeah, I think people should really just check out and admire the things that only New Orleans has to offer.
So I know you're biased, as we all are, but like, how do you think the Nola musicians stack up alongside musicians from New York or the West Coast or East Coast?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's classic. We're the best, right? We're the best. They suck. We're the best in the world. They lose. All right, that's the end of it.
Amen. Go Saints.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. But no, man, the New Orleans has always been. I mean, New York has always been full of just hip and bad cats, and they've just always been really great. You know, New Orleans, it's different. It really is apples and oranges, but. You know, New Orleans is dirtier. New York has always been, you know, really, really hip to all the jazz and stuff. And obviously, we're the birthplace of jazz. But in many ways, modern jazz has shifted to New York and stuff. And New Orleans is still the dirty funk, the grease, you know, dumpster funk. Ivan, you know, plays tons of poker. Ivan Neville. You know, so for the stuff I like, New Orleans is still number one. We're, you know, for funk and New Orleans sounds, New Orleans piano, Dr. John, the Meters, George Porter, just the New Orleans sound. We're still the best in that. Yeah, New York is clean and tight, but New York funk is not New Orleans funk. And then LA people doing funk is not, you know, New York or New Orleans. You know, it's all a different vibe. And New Orleans is still a real true vibe. You know, it's still gritty. There's no real cleanliness to it. Its product is rough around the edges. And that's what funk is. And I'm a funk guy, and yeah, man, soul and all that stuff that comes from New Orleans is yeah, it's just true, man. Other places are real clean. Doesn't mean that it's not hip and badass. It's just a different product.
Sure.
Yeah.
So to pivot back to poker in a similar vein, you know, it's interesting the way that Harrah is also nested inside the tourist economy. And yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts on how the games have changed over the years. You know, we were just talking about how the music industry has evolved, and I feel like that this is sort of a common refrain among poker players. You kind of have to follow the money. And we were talking before we started this interview just about the games in Texas and Houston. So yeah, I mean, how have the games changed at Harrah's in New Orleans, and are you optimistic about the games down here? Are you pessimistic? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, they changed. I mean, New Orleans in and of itself, and the New Orleans Harrah's game is unique in and of itself in that, as you know, we have a match the stack rule for our 1-3 game. So if somebody's sitting there with 4,000, somebody can just come in and buy in for 4K at the 1-3. So you'll have obviously varying stacks at the 1-3 game, kind of irrespective of what happens. But we don't offer really a regular 2-5 anymore, as you know. There's, you know, there used to be a regular 5-10 and a quarter PLO game. You know, that doesn't happen anymore. And a lot of that stopped kind of before COVID, but COVID just even facilitated that even more. You know, yeah, of course, a 5-10 game. I mean, a 2-5 no limit will appear, and of course they'll run the 1-2-5 PLO. But as far as like what used to be staple games at Harrah's New Orleans, a lot of those right before COVID and during COVID turned private and left the casino, or just ceased to exist. Actually, none of them ceased to exist. A lot of them just went private. Even like
I think that's the larger story of cash game poker is there's this tension between public and
100%.
Games, yeah.
But I think the games are still the games that do exist. You know, we're such a unique spot, New Orleans, and the people that play poker in New Orleans from off the street. You know, one guy may be here with like a bachelor party, one guy may be here with a convention. You know, you run into just all sorts of different people. So it's really, honestly, the New Orleans games are still some of the sickest games around, just because you just get a mix of everybody, and every hand plays almost like a different level. This may feel like a 1-3 hand, the next hand somebody may just make it 50. And it just goes call. You know, and it's like that hand played 5-10-esque, you know, and everybody's just ragers. They're just crazy. People off the street, you know, I mean, you know, I mean, like everybody, tons of basketball players come in and play, and
sure,
you know, just make it, just raise blind every hand because the game is too quote unquote small, you know, yeah, just sick, you know, and where else can you do that at 1-3?
There's a lot of volatility, and even table to table, you might be getting a totally different world.
Which is not the case. You know, anytime you sit down with, like, you know, the rest of the world, if you tried to sit down with 1,000 out of 1-3 game, people would be like, no, it's 300 max, you know, but it's just I think the most unique 1-3 game in America, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been the case that way for a long time.
For a long time, absolutely.
And
as long as that stays the course, I think Harrah's New Orleans will continue being a weird little sweet spot. But I am optimistic about the future of poker and in New Orleans, and even just like nationally, just globally even. I think poker is not being less accepted by the world, in my opinion. And I think people are continuing to like it more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. I think I don't know how closely you follow, stories that are happening in the poker world. There's been a lot of gloom and doomsaying around
like the bots.
Cheating, bots, whatever. Yeah. So that's obviously a thing. I think that's obviously more damning for online poker. But I think to your point, the bigger picture here is the relationship between poker and just gambling in the U.S. in general, and that has just exploded to a ridiculous extent. And I think as gambling becomes more and more normalized, so too does poker.
For sure.
So I think that
you're right.
There's going to be there's still going to be money to be made, but it was very interesting talking to folks, just sort of reaching out to folks during the pandemic when everything went dark. Nothing went dark in the gambling world. The money just shifted. Everybody's on Poker Bros and everybody's on the apps. And so I feel like one of the metagame skills that will always be important is just how do you follow the money? How do you adapt your style?
Yeah.
And so, I don't think the money's going away, but the skill set you might need to have access to the money, that is going to require some adaptability. I think.
Yeah. It's just, that's also part of the grind. I don't think anybody refers to that as a grind, really, but staying sharp and practicing, there's always some, I guess I'll say kid now, because I don't know, I'm getting older, but there's always like some kid that is, been practicing guitar his whole life and like wants your gig or wants to be a part of the scene like you used to. And like, the people that have that desire, it's just like accelerated learning and accelerated grinding. And if you're, ahead of those people, they're right on your tail, man. And, you got to stay relevant or for you, it's more work. For them, it's like, their life. This is, they're just so passionate because they're younger. And it's not that you're not passionate. It's just, there's always just somebody right behind you. And so to your point, people are getting better and better at poker, man. People are, using solvers. And of course, all the training sites are still out there and more out there. And same thing with music, man. Everybody's just trying to take your gig, man. They're better.
Do you find it similarly cutthroat as in poker? You feel like where people are just sort of like knocking on the door trying to like get their foot in and supplant you, or do you feel like it's more of a are there mentorships going on?
Honestly, I feel like it's just more the older that you get, it's more of a the whole thing of being an independent entrepreneur, even in business or poker or music, whatever you want it to be, is like the onus is on you. Like there is no boss, and so you have to be the one that wants to try and get better, whether that's through like feeling threatened or not. But to answer your question, no, I mean, it's not like y'all like feel like somebody's trying to get your gig or like you're gonna, but there's a feeling, I think, if you let yourself go and you don't stay sharp or you don't stay up to date, and through not doing that, you're falling behind because you're using old knowledge or you don't know what the current stuff is in music or other, then your likelihood of being overtaken is greatly increased. But it's not like anybody's there with like a knife on your back, except for maybe like you for like not doing anything,
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. So in the end, it might just be yourself.
Your lack of doing stuff.
Yeah.
But which means like, you got to work more. Nobody likes to quote unquote work, but it does become part of it. That's also, like I was saying, that is the grind, as well as putting in the time. And
yeah. So I have a couple like I guess concluding questions that I wanted to ask. But was there anything you wanted to talk about that we haven't gotten to yet?
No.
Covered some ground.
Yeah,
It's been
good.
So I would love to just like get some recommendations from you. I guess I would love to hear, like favorite Nola musicians or favorite sort of Nola, venues that you direct folks to? Maybe we can just start there.
Yeah, well, oh me. Yeah, where do we start?
Nice, easy question.
Yeah, no, these are great questions. You know, we'll start with some of the venues. Again, I love Tipatina. We can answer this kind of at the same time. Tipitina's is a great classic historic venue, and now owned by the guys from the band Galactic. Great band, great funk band. A lot of my friends, they're all wonderful as a band and as individual musicians. But Tipitina's is a great venue and great band in Galactic. And then I really love the Maple Leaf and all the bands I grew through there. They're family. I'm out there a lot. And then, you know, even on, I mean, Frenchman is great. I know it sounds like everybody's kind of down on Frenchman, but, you know, there's still great music, you know. And, of course, the Blue Nile, DBA, the Spotted Cat, you know, Snug Harbor. Those are all still great clubs. Great music, great calendars. Bands associated with this, man, it's everybody. It's you know, being a funk guy, the scene I'm in, I'm heavy in the funk scene. I'm heavy in the soul scene. I play a lot of soul. I play a lot of R&B. Play a lot of blues. Kind of play all that stuff. You know, I play at this black church on Sundays, so I'm in like a gospel scene, and so my whole scene, you know, I love dumpster funk, which is Ivan Neville. All those people. That's, in my opinion, the funkiest stuff, modern funk right now. You know, I play with a lot of Mardi Gras Indians. I play with, you know, some Indians. Big Chief Juan Pardo and the Golden Comanches, a group called Tribal Gold. It's a funk group. My good friends are in, just nominated for a Grammy, the Rumble. There's some Mardi Gras Indian stuff. And, you know, I play with a lot of guys. I have a good friends in this funk band called Lettuce. A few of them live here. And Nigel Hall, and a great soul singer and piano player. Yeah, you know, just all sorts of funk and soul. Erica Falls, she's a fabulous soul singer in town. And all these places, I mean, all these people play at all these places, at the Tipitinas, at the Maple Leafs, you know, really everywhere, you know. Even I mean, you can just, that's where New Orleans is so sick, is you can go to the Columns and hear people like Stanton Moore, who's the drummer for Galactic, and like, you can just hear we just have just such great music always, you know. And I don't know, man, you can really largely go anywhere and hear some of these musicians that are on the scene that are just the highest caliber musicians that New Orleans has to offer. They really are. People don't realize that because New Orleans is so small. You know, and you go to New York, are you ever really seeing, like, you know, the best person? I mean, I know that's not the way to look at music, but New York has just tons of musicians, but New Orleans has tons of musicians, but for being a small town, you really see the best that the city has to offer.
Yeah, there's just more and easier access.
There's just more and easier, consistent access, exactly. And so you'll see a lot of all these same musicians in just different bands, you know, with different artists, different songwriters, and yeah, it's great. It's incestuous, but it's sick.
Yeah. So kind of a related question, and we were talking a while back. I mean, you're also like a low-key student of New Orleans history and culture, and I'm wondering if there's any books, whether, you know, history books, novels, or like movies that you'd point folks to. I mean, the one that you mentioned that I think is, I mean, there's actually a number of them by Herbert Asbury, The French Quarter. I mean, if anybody's interested in like a really accessible, lively, well-written kind of history of early New Orleans culture, and also early New Orleans gambling. Asbury is just a fantastic resource. So yeah, I mean, you have any other recommendations you'd want to point listeners to?
Honestly, in my opinion, that's the best book to start at. And then he references, you know, other books which are personal accounts of life on the Mississippi, and, you know, like the steamboat gamblers and stuff. Honestly, that Herbert Asbury book is a great place to kind of like view like YouTube, like view it like a YouTube thing where you just go down the hole, just start Googling those things. But honestly, you know, I think a movie that a lot of people haven't seen maybe is like Cincinnati Kid, which is a poker movie which was filmed in New Orleans, and I mean, it's all about gambling and poker and in New Orleans because he travels here to play in some games, but I think people should see the Cincinnati Kid, even though it's like an old movie, but it's a good one.
Definitely.
You know, everybody likes to talk about Rounders, and that's a sick one too. The Cincinnati Kid and that Absury book, I think are great.
Nice. So yeah, last question is if there's anything that you'd like to plug or like let people know about in terms of your upcoming schedule. I know Jazz Fest is a busy time for you, and so yeah, what do you have going on in the upcoming?
Oh yeah.
months?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm fortunate to play with a bunch of different people, and last year you came to a couple gigs, I think, Jazz Fest is it's quickly approaching, even though as we speak, what is it, February something?
It's February something. It's the Thursday before Fat Tuesday.
God, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mardi Gras is upon us. Yeah, but Jazz Fest is quickly here. French Quarter Fest will be here right before that, and then all these other little fests like out here actually. Like Creole Tomato-esque. But so I have a lot of stuff. I play with a few different groups. So you can check me out over Jazz Fest in any capacity, really. I play with this group, the New Orleans Suspects. I play with soul singer Erica Falls. I play with my own group called Eric's Gonna Die. I'm doing some gigs with some people from the Revivalists. The Revivalist guitar player Zach Feinberg. You saw me last year with Maggie Kerner, I believe. So, you know, I'm really kind of everywhere. You know, you can follow me on my Instagram at evbase504. But yeah, man, just classic, just different artists in New Orleans. But the schedule is busy. I'm pretty fortunate. There's Mardi Gras Indian bands, like I said, Tribal Gold. Just a few different groups, but I'm always posting my stuff.
Great. Yeah, and one thing we'll do is we'll have a nice long list of show notes to this episode.
Nice,
so we'll put some links in for folks to connect. But yeah, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, and best of luck on the felt, on the stage, and in all other areas.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.